Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Hey Bill, how you doing today?
Angela, I just never been this happy. How about you?
Oh, I am tippy-tappy, as always. Today, Bill, we are very excited to have a special guest with us. Maurice Civers-Davis, aka Mo, is a keynote speaker, executive leadership coach, and founder of Civers Davis Development LLC and Independence Foundry, or 501c3. Mo is a former federal leader, say that 5 times fast, who helps organizations lead through workforce disruption without losing their people, culture, or mission. He equips leaders to navigate change, identify shifts, and high-pressure environments with clarity and confidence. Mo, thanks so much for being here. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks for having me. You as well, Bill. Thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to add to your bio to give us more background of who you are?
I think that was a mouthful, what you just mentioned. I think you pretty much summed it up well, and thank you for that lovely intro. I appreciate it as well.
Of
Well,
course.
so Mo, we know you because we knew you when we were all in the same big organization for the federal government. And you talk about workforce disruption. Kind of feels like there's a little bit of that going on these days. And so since this is a mentoring podcast and you're coaching these days, have you spent a lot of time with any of the folks who are coming out of the federal government who are struggling with what's next and sort of helping them lay out career stuff and offering some mentoring advice to those folks?
Bill, thanks for the question, and I appreciate that question. I actually have. Earlier this morning, I spent time with 2 of my clients who were part of the federal government, and they they took the DRP, the Deferred Resignation Program. They took that, and they've entered the job market, and they're trying to figure out like what's next. And one is okay with their current job assignment. The other one is not what he thought it would be. And they're trying to figure out what happens next. And a big part of that is a loss of self-identity. For those 2 individuals that I just spoke of, they've been in the military or federal government for 20 plus years. So that has become their identity for the most part. And to suddenly not have that and have to pivot and redefine what that identity will now look like moving forward, that hits home for them really, really hard. And they're struggling with that. And it's not just those 2. I was actually one of those statistics as well. I transitioned from the federal government last year, back in October. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't like that I planned it out for a year or 2. It was, that decision came pretty suddenly and abruptly. So I identified with those 2 individuals as well as so many others that are finding themselves in that same situation. And what I tell them is something that one of my mentors told me is that I now, just like they do, we now have the power of the pen. We have the ability to write what our next chapter looks like. And the big part of that is getting still, getting in root or in touch with your authentic self and asking yourself, where do we want to go next? And working your network. Working your network is hugely important. So those are some of the things that I think about the most when I have interactions with people that are in the midst of disruption, especially considering that they're transitioning from the federal government.
Yeah. So you mentioned your mentors. How did you go about finding mentors as you were making such a big change?
Wow. How do I go about finding mentors? Well, to be quite honest with you, when I look for mentors, I look for people with integrity, um, people that have demonstrated results, and people, to be quite honest with you, that have humility. And I have really tried to center my life around those kind of individuals. But a big part of it had to, even though I knew that those individuals were out there and my eyes were, keenly placed on those individuals, a big part had to start with me. And a big part of that meant that I needed to be humble and I needed to not be so prideful and ask for help. And I think we, as members who have transitioned from the federal government or veterans that have left the military, we struggle with pride sometimes. And it's not just people that are associated with the federal government. It's people in commercial industry who've been there for quite some time. We struggle with pride, and sometimes we don't like to ask. But who doesn't ask, you won't necessarily be blessed with the opportunities that could be before you. So we sometimes have to bite our pride. So for me, those individuals that I had keenly been focused on for quite some time, I had to swallow my pride, go out and ask for help. And believe it or not, I found that people are willing to help you. They're willing to help you if you ask. Not only do you need to ask, you have to be specific in your ask. Because if they don't know what your needs are, they're just assuming. And if they're assuming, and if you're assuming, and we're not going to get anywhere. So be firm in your ask and be specific in your ask, is what I found.
So there's a lot of meat in what you just talked about, which I appreciate. First was, talked about integrity, humility, and success. And so those were sort of at least you categorized the first three things you look for in your mentors, which I certainly would echo those thoughts. But it talks to the importance of finding mentors who share the same set of values that you have. And so that really resonates, and it actually has been a subject of some discussion in previous casts with us. The other part is getting over yourself and saying, I've got to go ask for help, but being very specific. So, I mean, those are really meaty conversations to think about for people who are looking for mentoring help. So that was as the mentee. So I can imagine in your new position, you find yourself being much more the mentor than the mentee. How do you go about finding the folks that are looking for mentoring?
Sure, absolutely. So to believe it or not, there's a lot of, so through coaching, I have clients, and through just everyday life, I have mentees. For the mentees, some find me just by the nature of what I do, and they seek out mentoring. But I found the most rewarding experience have come from those that I've actually seen something in them that they didn't necessarily see in themselves. I've seen something in them that it's like for instance, a lot of it is confidence, to be quite honest with you. Education, skill set, that gets you in the door. But once you're in the door, what really creates an opportunity for you to leave forward is a sense of confidence. And of course, communication. So what I found is when I go out, and part of being a leader, I think, is, a leader has to lead first. A leader has to go out and sometimes pick first rather than waiting to be asked all the time. So for me, people find me, but as a leader, I go out and I tap young talent that I deem, hey, you know what? They could actually benefit from mentoring from me.
So how do you go about finding them? That's been a conversation we've had with a number of different guests talking about. So sometimes formalized mentoring programs say, okay, we're going to take our top 10% performers, whatever. And so we've already decided that they're the ones that we're going to mentor. Well, what about the other 90%? And so I was just wondering how you go about selecting folks, and how do you go about finding folks that in whom you see that kind of potential?
So long ago, one of my mentors, I think there's two parts to this. Long ago, one of my mentors in the Department of the Navy told me that in order to be an effective mentor, you have to meet people where they are. And so for me, I look in my current environment and I look for people that are that I see that have a zeal to do better, have a hunger to do better, but yet their circumstances or their situation may not necessarily be the most constructive for them to achieve what they aspire to be. So for me, I meet my mentors where they are, and that's in the communities, in the environments that I naturally gravitate to. So, and I found that those are the ones that have been the most fruitful for me because, one in STEM, for instance, there's something that we say that people can't be what they can't see. So when I'm in my natural element, when I'm in my natural environment, there's always someone looking at you, whether you know it or not. There's always someone that says, hey, I want to be like that guy, or I want to be like that lady. But yet they don't know how to approach you. So for me, people come to me, they find me, but I like to put my hands on them as well. That's how I found to be most productive for me. And that may not work for everybody, but for me, I found that to be successful.
It sounds like you're very involved in your community, and that's the way you've been able to gain connections, both as people to mentor as well as finding mentors.
Yes, I'm very engaged in my community. I'm engaged from the veterans perspective, I'm very heavily involved in the veteran community here in Philadelphia, in the region. From my local community, I'm involved with the school system, the local school district. I'm just hugely involved. I think that is the core of when you spoke about values earlier, Bill. To me, being a civic leader, that's part of my value. That's part of my upbringing. Especially in the current climate and current environment, we oftentimes want to criticize or say, well, why don't they do this, or why aren't they doing that? Well, after a while, you have to stop saying, why aren't they, and what am I doing, or what am I not doing? And if I'm engaged in my community, then I get a chance to make a difference. I get a chance to dictate how we move forward as a family, how we move forward as a community. And by being out there in the community, people are going to naturally gravitate towards you. People are going to naturally gravitate. And that's another thing, too. Mentors, being a mentor, that's a title. Actually, being a leader that people want to follow, that's actionable. That's like, what are you doing in your day-to-day life? What are you doing in your day-to-day life? And if you're doing things that you know are deeply rooted in who you are as a person, you're going to have you're mentoring. Some people are mentoring, they don't even realize it. And I think that's the beautiful part about being aligned with your authentic self, is that when you become aligned with your authentic self, you're going to realize that we're all mentoring. We're all mentoring. But we have to decide and we have to choose, how do we want to mentor? And how do we want to get better at mentoring? How do we want to how do we want to get better?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect question. How do you recommend people get better at mentoring? How do you define what good is as a mentor, and then how do you recommend people get better at it?
Wow, that's a great question. How do I define being a good mentor? Being your authentic self. Being your authentic self and being your best self. That's the best advice I can give to anyone. And that, I'm from Georgia, so I'm from the South, and I grew up with a lot of the Southern traditions and morals and all of that. And I was raised like my dad wasn't like heavily in my life. It was mostly my mom and my grandmother, aunties and uncles. And I learned from them how to be a leader. I learned from them that leadership comes from you leading from who you are and where you are. I don't have to have a title to lead. I don't have to have a title to mentor. Like, I don't have to say, hey, I'm a mentor. I'm mentoring. People are mentoring in church and don't even realize they're mentoring. So being in touch with your authentic self, being your best self, and being like who you truly are. But then as you do that, realize that none of us are perfect. We're all striving to get better. We're all striving to get better. So that means we have to read. We have to read. We have to become more knowledgeable. We have to be inquisitive. Have to be curious. We have to be aligned with our values. Those are things that just comes with, I think, being just a wonderful human being.
Well, man, there's just a whole bunch in that, what you just talked about, Mo, which is fantastic. And I think I'm gonna go way out on a limb and say I don't think you give yourself enough credit. When you talk about being a leader, and you talked about not looking around and saying, quit your complaining. What is it that I should be doing to make a difference? If I don't like the way something's going on in my environment, what is it that I can do to influence a different outcome? And so when people see you doing that regularly, and they see you demonstrating integrity in what you do, and following through on those kinds of things, and caring about other folks, that's the kind of stuff that gets people to follow you. The best definition of leadership I ever heard, I got from a school, but I like it a lot. It's, the art of gaining followers.
Yes.
Somebody says they're a leader. If they look behind them and there's nobody following, I'm not sure they're a leader. They may be in a leadership position,
Yes.
but then if there's nobody following, there ain't much leadership going on. And so when you're talking about becoming a leader in your community, I think it comes from the values that you demonstrate and the proactive nature that you obviously have embraced, that said, if I don't like what I see, I'm going to go do something about it myself instead of wishing that other folks stepped up. And so to me, that's you're capturing a lot of sort of fundamental leadership that makes people want to follow you as you're going through that.
Well, thank you for that, Bill. I tell you, one of the things I learned while we were working together from, one of the teams down in Charleston was people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And by being engaged in your communities in whatever aspect that may be, whatever your domain or your domicile may be, being engaged, truly engaged, and being rooted in there, not just showing up but being engaged, they see that you care. And with mentoring, so to me, mentoring isn't necessarily about giving advice. Mentoring to me is asking the right questions, asking powerful questions. If I'm giving advice all of the time, then I'm not really empowering the mentee. But if I'm asking questions in such a powerful way that it causes them to pause and to reflect and understand that they already have the answer. My question hopefully allows them to unlock what's already inside of them. And that to me is when the transformation happens, because I'm giving them the ability to be able to sustain their own progress, their own trajectory. And if I do that as a mentor, oh my gosh, imagine the possibilities. And I see that oftentimes. I saw it when we were doing the STEM outreach, when you would take, high school students that had never been on a Navy base before. They had never been on a Navy base. This is their first internship, first generational students or whatever. That's even from some of the college students. And they all of a sudden are on this Navy base, and they hear these airplanes, and they see all these, you're talking about all these things that they see on TV. Imagine they're afraid, they're excited, they're nervous, but yet they know that something awesome is about to happen. So when I see that and they shoulder up anyway, they square up anyway, this is, I'm going to get after it. But yet they see their peers and their peers are feeling the same way. And I pull them all together. I pull them all together and says, hey, you know what? How are we feeling right now? And show them that it's okay to be vulnerable. And that's another part about, to me, being a mentor, is that you have to show vulnerability. You have to show vulnerability because that's actually where the power is. That's where the power is by being vulnerable.
So you talked. Oh, go ahead.
You talked about if all you're doing is giving advice and you're not like coming with some curiosity, then adding on to that thought is you're giving advice for you, for a younger version of you, right? So you're giving advice from your perspective with your lens on it without having curiosity about the other person and their goals and their aspirations and what's important to them and their values and all of the things that you're not, if you're not curious about it, then it's ineffective mentoring because you're giving advice that you're hoping they would follow so that they could, I don't know, maybe be a little mini you, or a younger you versus being their best version of themselves.
Absolutely. You said that perfectly. Absolutely. And my job as a mentor is to be a mirror for them so that not for them to see me, but for them to see themselves as I ask those powerful questions. So yeah, you summed it up perfectly.
We're going to timestamp this, Bill, so that we know the only time I've said something perfect in this podcast.
Yep. Take notes on that one, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So a couple of times you've mentioned powerful questions and the ones that you ask. Could you give a couple examples of what you consider powerful questions that opened up possibilities for your mentees?
Sure.
I mean, certainly I know both you and Angela as coaches. Oh, you ask questions. I've never been a coach, but I have been coached, and it drove me crazy, but it was very effective. That the open-ended questions that were used to help me to get to think through what the problem set was and what I might do about it, and make commitments, etc. So what I was looking for, those kinds of, those can certainly be powerful questions. I would come to the coaching session and say, I'm looking for advice, and they would do nothing but ask questions, and so it drove me crazy, but it was extremely effective. So I'm okay with you thinking, if you want to think to coaching questions that have powered people through, that's all good.
Oh, so sure. Bill, absolutely. So go ahead, Angela.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I'd love to tackle the powerful questions question with, especially as a mentor. One really great one is, what's important to you? Hey, mentee, what's important to you? And when you start opening up that conversation and you get to know your mentee a little better, that helps give some insight into what they value and what is important to them. And then to another great, powerful question for a mentor to ask a mentee is, especially I've had mentees that say, I want to be an insert role here. And a big question is, like, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to take on that role, right? What are you willing to sacrifice? What do you envision that role to look like? And what are you willing to sacrifice in order to get there? Because unfortunately, sometimes people want the title without the process to get there, right? You've seen a lot of those adages, like, at times people love or really envy where you're at without recognizing the journey to get there. And so I think that's important conversations between a mentor and a mentee to really give good perspective. Mo, I cut in on you though. What were you want to add?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Another powerful question that I asked not too long ago in one of the workshops that we did was, like, what's your why? Why is this important to you? Why? And I feel like before you can really dedicate your all in all, you have to best understand your why. And sometimes your why isn't what you think your why really is. And so we did a workshop down in D.C. and it was with a bunch of young leaders actually, and they were super excited about their jobs. It was actually doing an orientation. They were super excited about their jobs and all that. But we went down, we broke them up into teams and groups, and we talked about why this job was so important to them. Why was this job so important to them? And many of them, it was their dream job. Many of them, it was their first job experience. They were the first ones to go to D.C. to do a big, position like this. But then too, is that your why? Is that your why? Until you get better centered in your why, will you really give it your all in all, and will you really give it your best? So that's one of the questions I feel like we have to sometimes ask that question multiple times to get to the truth of what the why is. I found.
Or tell me more. The answer
Tell
is
me
tell
more.
me more. Tell
Yeah,
me
it's
more.
interesting. You talk about that in mentoring positions, but I will tell you that finding and knowing your why can be very powerful, not just in mentoring and conversations. It just occurred to me while you were talking, while I was in an interview for my last job, which was, to be the leader of a large organization, they asked me, why do you want this job? And I had a very clear answer for them that I think sat very well, because it talked about serving the country and serving the Navy and serving the nation in a bigger, more influential way, because that's what I was raised on. And I mean, it wasn't something I wasn't trying to fill in a block somewhere. It was meaningful, and I was passionate in delivering that, not because I was trying to put on a show, because it really matters. And so I'm totally resonating with finding people's why, because it drives not only their behavior for any given job, but it also will drive the people around you, because they're going to see this isn't a play. You're not doing this as a performance. You're doing this because it matters to you. And so that's just a really powerful conversation to have with your mentees. I'm totally resonating with this discussion right now, and it just popped in my head. I got asked that in my interview for the last and most important job that I wanted to fulfill while I was still working full time. So thank you for even reminding me, but I think that's a very powerful conversation to have.
You didn't
Absolutely. Thanks a
answer.
lot. I'm
You didn't
sorry.
answer and say I wanted the good parking spot.
I thought about that answer, because Lord knows I was jonesing for that good parking spot. But that wasn't my go-to at that
That
moment.
wasn't your go-to.
Not like you got free donuts and coffee every day, that's for sure.
No, I brought free donuts and coffee.
Oh,
Exactly.
wow. You were the favorite.
Hey, man, I didn't say I was above bribery. If donuts is all I need to do to get people
Hey, whatever
working,
works.
bring it.
Well,
Do what you got to do.
yeah. Hey Mo, if you were to give advice, 10 words or less, to people looking for mentors, what would you say?
Um, I would say, oh gosh, I would say talent is optional. Coachability is non-negotiable. Talent is optional. Talent is optional, but you have to be coachable. You have to be coachable. We had one person that came on board that was super sharp, super sharp. And he knew that. So when I was at the University of Penn, I took a software development program. And there was this guy in there. He was sharp. He was by far the sharpest kid in the class. And he was just phenomenal. And we both graduated with honors. And how that happened for me, I don't know. But we graduated, and then he went on into the job market. I went back to my naval command, and he went looking for jobs in the job market, and he was having a difficult time finding a job. And I reached out to him because we were hiring. I reached out to him, And I says, hey, if you're looking for an opportunity, here's one here with us, but you got to apply. He applied, he got the job, and we brought him on board. But what amazed me about this young person is that he walked through the door knowing that he was sharp, knowing that like this guy was super sharp, but he walked through the door being so humble and so graceful. And he walked through the door being a sponge, ready to absorb as much knowledge as he possibly could. And so what that showed leadership is that this person was coachable. He was coachable. And I think that's huge. That's huge, because if you're not coachable, then I question, what are you here for? What do you need me for?
Yeah, that's a really important point. So coachable, obviously humble and willing to learn. Anything else? Because I think this is an important point for folks who are looking on how to be a good mentee. Can you expand on other traits of being coachable?
Being coachable, not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to, you don't have to be right all the time. I often say, if you give me someone I would rather take someone on to be a part of my team who's not afraid to fail and who has had experienced failure before, rather than someone who hasn't. Because if you've experienced failure, and if you're here with me, then you've obviously gotten back up again. So you know how to fall and you know how to get back up, like riding a bike. You know how to fall, but yet you know how to get back up. And to get back up oftentimes takes gumption, it takes audacity, and it takes a sense of pride in self. And if you have that, then I would love to have you on my team. And I think that goes a long ways. And we've seen some people that come through the doors from a job perspective that they always wanted to be right. And when they weren't, and when they were not right, they turned into a complete different person, or they changed the mood, the climate of the office, the culture of that. They changed that. And those aren't necessarily the kind of people that I think organizations are looking for. So if you're holding space and if you're holding capacity to fail, I think that's actually a superpower. I think that's a superpower.
Mm-hmm. We have covered so much in this conversation, so much good, rich content, Mo. We started out the conversation with you talking about mentoring people through transitions and how you really ask them to get some stillness and understand what it is that they want to do to write their next chapter. And then you talked about looking for mentors and how you really look for people with integrity, with humility, and with demonstrated results as being primary keys in finding mentors. And then with respect to mentees, having some humility, being willing to ask for help, be specific about what it is you're asking for. And you talked about being an effective mentor, meeting people where they're at. And we talked a little bit about powerful questions, getting curious with people and not just giving advice, and how you found people through being really involved in your community. We wrapped up with this idea of talent is optional, but coachability is non-negotiable. And you talked a lot about what coachability means and coming with an attitude of humility, with willingness to learn and willingness to be curious as being a primary skill that you look for in individuals, especially to mentor them, but also what you recommend people to come to a mentoring kind of relationship with, or any kind of job really, as well. What did we miss, or what did I miss in what we talked about today?
Wow, Angela, the way you summed that was a podcast all by itself. I was like, did I actually say those things? You summarized
Okay,
that.
so I'm going to add one that you did talk about, and that was being proactive. That's another important point, actually, for mentor and mentee. if you don't like the way something's going, what are you doing to fix it? Or what are you doing to influence different outcomes? Which not only translates to good mentoring, but also to good leadership. So I wanted to make sure we didn't lose that one as we went through here.
That's so true. Being proactive is definitely, when you said proactive, Bill, one of the ones that I wanted to highlight, but I didn't, is accountability, being accountable. And accountability comes from both sides of the equation, from the mentor as well as the mentee. We each have to be accountable, and we got to hold the other accountable as well.
Excellent. So, Mo, look, I think people are going to resonate with a lot of things you talked about. If you're willing, could you share, how do people reach out to you and get advice from you, or be able to ask you as a mentor or ask you as a coach?
Sure.
How do they get a hold of you?
Sure, absolutely. So you can reach me at MoCivers-Davis.com. So Mo Civers, Civers, Davis, Davis.com. That's the website. Or you can reach me via email. The email is quite long, but it's Mo@Civers-Davis Development.com.
Excellent. Well, look, it's great to see you again, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time and sharing so much great expertise with everybody. It's been a phenomenal discussion. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. And thank you, guys, and I wish you well.
Great. So, with that, thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share it with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.